The evening had settled into a familiar rhythm. I was sitting in my home office, the warm glow of the desk lamp illuminating the papers and notebooks scattered across my desk. It was a quiet night, and I was eagerly waiting for my nightly video call with Emily. Despite being married for a year, we often found ourselves in different cities due to our demanding jobs, and these calls were our lifeline, a way to stay connected. "Hey, John." Emily's voice greeted me as her face appeared on the screen. Her smile was as radiant as ever, and I felt a surge of warmth spread through me. We chatted about our day, laughing at the little anecdotes and sharing plans for the weekend. It was our routine, a small comfort in the chaos of our lives. "All right then. I'll be back tomorrow night." "Good night, love," she said, waving at the camera. I responded in kind but decided to have a bit of fun. As she reached to end the call, I pretended to do the same but instead turned off my screen, watching her through the darkened monitor. Emily, thinking the call had ended, sighed and relaxed in her chair. I stifled a chuckle, wondering how long I could keep up the charade before she caught on. She stood up and accidentally knocked over a cup on her desk, spilling its contents all over her clothes. "Oh no," she exclaimed, her voice tinged with frustration. She began to take off her blouse, and that's when I saw them. The scars. They were faint but unmistakable, scattered across her back and arms. My heart pounded in my chest, my mind racing to process what I was seeing. "Emily," I said, my voice trembling as I turned the screen back on. She froze, her eyes wide with shock. "John." I thought the call had ended. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to intrude. What happened to you?" I asked, unable to mask the concern in my voice. She looked down, her fingers nervously twisting the fabric of her blouse. "It's nothing, really. Just some old scars." "Emily, please, talk to me. What's going on?" I implored, my heart aching for her. She hesitated, then took a deep breath. "It's a long story, John. A painful one. I'm here for you. Whatever it is, I want to know," I said gently, trying to convey my unwavering support. She nodded slowly, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Okay, but not over the phone. Let's talk about it when I get back tomorrow." "Of course. I'll be waiting," I replied, my mind already racing with 1,000 questions. That night, sleep eluded me as I replayed the scene over and over in my mind. What kind of pain had Emily endured? Why had she hidden it from me all this time? My heart ached for her, and I resolved to be there for her, no matter what. The next day couldn't come soon enough. When the morning sun finally peeked through the curtains, I found myself filled with a mix of anticipation and dread. I busied myself with work, but my mind was elsewhere. Every ticking second seemed to stretch on endlessly until finally, the day turned to evening, and I heard the front door open. "John, I'm home," Emily called out, her voice tired but familiar. I rushed to the door, pulling her into a gentle embrace. "Welcome back." She looked at me, a mixture of fear and determination in her eyes. "Let's sit down. We need to talk." We moved to the living room, and I held her hand as she began to unravel the story of her past, a tale filled with pain, resilience, and hidden scars. As she spoke, I realized that the accidental discovery had opened a door to a deeper understanding of the woman I loved. The next morning dawned with a sense of urgency. I couldn't shake the image of Emily's scars from my mind. Questions swirled endlessly, and the need to understand what she had endured consumed me. I spent the day in a haze, the minutes dragging by until she returned home in the evening. "John, I'm home," Emily called out from the hallway, her voice filled with the familiar warmth I loved. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the conversation ahead. "Hey, Em, can we talk for a bit?" She looked at me, a flicker of apprehension crossing her face, but she nodded. "Sure, let's sit down." We settled on the couch, and I took her hands in mine, feeling the tension radiating from her. "Emily, last night, I saw your scars. I'm so sorry for seeing them like that, but I need to understand. What happened to you?" Emily's eyes widened, and she looked away, her hands trembling slightly. "I was hoping you wouldn't bring it up," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I can't pretend I didn't see them. Emily, please, talk to me." "I want to help," I urged gently, squeezing her hands for reassurance. She sighed deeply, the weight of years of pain and secrets pressing down on her. "It's not something I like to talk about, John. It's hard. I know it must be, but I'm here for you. Whatever it is, you don't have to face it alone," I said, my heart aching for her. Emily took a deep breath, her eyes glistening with tears. "It all started when I was a child. My parents, they weren't like other parents. They were abusive, my father especially. He had a terrible temper, and whenever he was angry, he would take it out on me. The scars you saw, they're from when he burned me with cigarettes." I felt a surge of anger and sadness wash over me. "Emily, that's horrible. I'm so sorry you had to go through that." She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "It was my reality for so long. I learned to hide it, to cover up the scars, and pretend everything was normal. But the pain never really went away." I pulled her into a gentle embrace, holding her close as she cried. "You don't have to hide anymore, Emily. I'm here, and I love you. We'll get through this together." Emily clung to me, her sobs slowly subsiding. "Thank you, John. I've never told anyone about this before. I was too scared, too ashamed." "There's nothing to be ashamed of," I said softly. "You're incredibly brave for surviving all that. And now you have me. We'll find a way to make things better." She pulled back slightly, looking into my eyes. "I've always felt like I had to be strong on my own. It's hard to let someone else in. I understand, but you don't have to be alone anymore. I'm right here, and I'm not going anywhere," I reassured her. Emily managed a small, tearful smile. "I don't know what I did to deserve you, John. You deserve so much more, Emily. And I'll do everything I can to make sure you have the life you deserve," I promised. We spent the rest of the evening talking, Emily slowly opening up about her past, sharing painful memories that had haunted her for years. With each revelation, I felt my resolve strengthen. This was the beginning of a new chapter for us, a chapter where we faced her past together, and where she no longer had to carry the burden alone. The following days were filled with a quiet but profound change in our relationship. Emily's confession had opened a door to a deeper understanding, and I was determined to support her in every way I could. Our conversations became more meaningful, our bond stronger as we navigated this new terrain together. One evening, after a particularly long day at work, I came home to find Emily sitting at the kitchen table, a book in her hands. She looked up as I entered, her face lighting up with a smile that never failed to warm my heart. "Hey, how was your day?" she asked, setting the book aside. "Exhausting, but it's better now that I'm home," I replied, walking over to give her a kiss. "What are you reading?" "Just something to unwind," she said, glancing at the cover. "It's one of my favorites from college." "Do you want to talk about your day?" I shook my head. "I'd rather hear about yours. How have you been feeling?" Emily sighed, her smile fading slightly. "It's been a lot to process, but talking to you has helped more than I can say." "Thank you, John." I pulled out a chair and sat next to her, taking her hand in mine. "You don't have to thank me, Emily. I'm your husband. This is what I'm here for. How are you coping with everything?" She hesitated, then took a deep breath. "It's strange. For so long, I've kept all of this buried. Now that it's out in the open, I feel lighter, in a way, but also scared. I'm not used to being this vulnerable." "Vulnerability isn't a weakness, Em. It's a sign of strength, and you're one of the strongest people I know," I said, squeezing her hand gently. A small smile tugged at her lips. "You always know what to say to make me feel better." "I'm just being honest," I replied, smiling back. "Have you thought about talking to a therapist? It might help to have someone to guide you through this." Emily nodded slowly. I have thought about it. I think I'm ready to try. But I'm scared, John. Scared of reliving all those memories. I'll be with you every step of the way, I promised. You don't have to face it alone. And if it ever gets too overwhelming, we'll take it one day at a time. No rush. Her eyes softened, and she leaned in to kiss me. Thank you. That means more than you know. We sat in comfortable silence for a while. The only sound the ticking of the kitchen clock. The peace was a stark contrast to the emotional storm we had weathered recently. It felt like a new beginning, a chance to rebuild and strengthen our relationship. John, there's something else I need to tell you, Emily said after a while, her voice barely above a whisper. I looked at her, concern etching my features. What is it? She took a deep breath, her hands trembling slightly. I've been having nightmares. Ever since I told you about my past, they've become more frequent. I wake up in a panic, sometimes not even realizing where I am. My heart ached for her. Emily, why didn't you tell me sooner? I didn't want to worry you. You've already done so much, she said, looking down. Hey, I said softly, lifting her chin so she would look at me. We're in this together, remember? I want to know everything, even the hard parts. Especially the hard parts. We'll find a way to deal with the nightmares. Maybe talking to a therapist will help with that too. She nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. I'm sorry for keeping it from you. There's nothing to be sorry for. We're learning how to navigate this together. And we will get through it, I said firmly, wrapping my arms around her. In that embrace, I felt a new sense of purpose. Our relationship had always been built on love and trust, but now it was being forged in the fire of understanding and resilience. Emily's courage to confront her past was inspiring, and I was more determined than ever to stand by her side. As we sat there, holding each other, I knew that this journey would not be easy. There would be more challenges, more difficult conversations, and probably more tears. But there would also be healing, growth, and a deeper connection than we had ever known. Let's take it one day at a time, I whispered into her hair. Together. Emily nodded against my chest. Together. The morning sun filtered through the curtains, casting a warm glow over our bedroom. Emily was still asleep, her face peaceful for the first time in days. I gently brushed a strand of hair from her forehead and slipped out of bed, careful not to wake her. Today was a big day. We were going to take the first step in legally separating Emily from her abusive parents. I made my way to the kitchen and started brewing coffee. As the aroma filled the room, I thought about the conversation we had last night. We had decided it was time to seek legal help to ensure Emily's safety and well-being. I knew a good lawyer, Tom, a college friend who specialized in family law. I had already called him and set up an appointment for today. Emily walked into the kitchen, rubbing her eyes. Morning, John. Good morning. How did you sleep? I asked, handing her a cup of coffee. Better, thanks to you, she said with a soft smile. Are you ready for today? I am. Are you? I asked, searching her eyes for any signs of hesitation. She took a deep breath and nodded. Yes, I'm ready. I know it's the right thing to do. We finished our coffee in silence, the weight of what we were about to do hanging heavily in the air. We got dressed and headed out, making our way to Tom's office. Tom greeted us with a warm smile as we entered his office. John, Emily, it's good to see you. Please, have a seat. Thanks for seeing us on such short notice, Tom, I said as we sat down. Of course. John told me a bit about your situation, Emily. I'm so sorry you've had to go through this. Let's talk about how we can help you, Tom said, his tone gentle and reassuring. Emily nodded, her hands trembling slightly. Thank you, Tom. I appreciate your help. Tom leaned forward, his expression serious. First, we need to gather as much information as possible about your parents and the abuse you endured. This will help us build a strong case. Do you feel comfortable sharing that with me? Emily took a deep breath and began recounting her experiences, her voice steady despite the painful memories. She described the abuse in detail, the scars left both on her body and her soul. Tom listened attentively, taking notes and occasionally asking questions to clarify certain points. When Emily finished, Tom looked at her with admiration. "You're incredibly brave for sharing this, Emily. Now, we'll file for a restraining order and begin the process of legally separating you from your parents. We'll also ensure that any contact from them results in a substantial fine." Emily nodded, her eyes glistening with tears. "Thank you, Tom. It means so much to have your support. We'll start by drafting the necessary documents," Tom said, turning to his computer. "Once we have everything in place, we'll file them with the court. It might take some time, but we'll get through this together." As Tom worked, I reached out and took Emily's hand, offering her silent support. She squeezed my hand tightly, her grip conveying a mix of fear and determination. After an hour, Tom printed out the documents and handed them to us. "These are the first steps. We'll need your signatures on these forms, and then we'll file them with the court." Emily took the pen and signed the documents, her hands shaking slightly. When she was done, she looked at Tom and then at me. "This is really happening, isn't it?" "It is," I said, squeezing her hand. "And we're doing it together." Tom stood up and shook our hands. "I'll handle the rest from here. If you need anything, don't hesitate to call me. We'll keep you updated on the progress." "Thank you, Tom," I said, feeling a sense of relief wash over me. As we left Tom's office, I could see the weight lifting from Emily's shoulders. She was no longer alone in her struggle. We were taking action, and that gave her a renewed sense of hope and strength. On the drive home, Emily looked out the window, her expression contemplative. "John, do you think this will really work? Do you think I'll finally be free?" "I do, Emily. We're taking the right steps, and we have Tom on our side. You're incredibly strong, and we'll get through this together," I said, my voice filled with conviction. She turned to me, a small smile playing on her lips. "Thank you, John, for everything." "No need to thank me, Em. This is what love is all about, standing by each other, no matter what," I replied, reaching over to squeeze her hand. As we drove through the city, the sun setting behind us, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. We were on a path to healing, and while the journey ahead might be challenging, I knew that together we could overcome anything. Emily's scars told a story of pain, but our love and determination would rewrite it into a story of strength and resilience. The following weeks were a whirlwind of legal proceedings, emotional confrontations, and moments of intense vulnerability. Emily and I found ourselves at the center of a legal battle that would determine her future and her freedom from the shackles of her past. Our first court appearance was nerve-wracking. Emily sat beside me, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, her face pale but determined. Tom was with us, his presence a steady anchor in the storm of emotions swirling around us. "Remember, we're here to tell your story, Emily," Tom said, his voice calm and reassuring. "You've been incredibly brave so far. Just keep that courage." Emily nodded, taking a deep breath. "I will, Tom. Thank you." As the proceedings began, the opposing counsel, a sharp, stern-looking woman, presented their case, attempting to downplay the severity of the abuse Emily had endured. They argued that there was no substantial evidence to support our claims and that Emily's parents had a right to maintain contact with their daughter. Tom stood up, his demeanor confident and composed. "Your Honor, we have substantial evidence to support our claims. We have medical records documenting the injuries sustained by Emily during her childhood, as well as testimonies from individuals who witnessed the abuse." The judge, a middle-aged woman with kind but firm eyes, nodded. "Proceed, Mr. Harris." Tom called Emily to the stand. I watched as she walked up, her steps hesitant but purposeful. She took a seat and was sworn in, her eyes meeting mine briefly, seeking reassurance. I gave her an encouraging nod, and she began to speak. "Emily, Can you tell the court about your experiences growing up? Tom asked, his voice gentle. Emily took a deep breath, her hands trembling slightly. Yes. From a young age, I was subjected to physical and emotional abuse by my parents. My mother would burn me with cigarettes, and my father would often hit me. They blamed me for everything that went wrong in their lives. I wore heavy clothing to hide the scars and avoided social situations because I was ashamed and afraid. Can you describe the impact this abuse had on your life? Tom asked. It destroyed my self-confidence, Emily said, her voice trembling. I grew up believing that I was worthless, that everything was my fault. Even after I met John, and we got married, I couldn't shake the fear and shame. I didn't feel safe until I finally told him the truth. The opposing counsel stood up, her expression skeptical. Emily, isn't it true that you've been estranged from your parents for several years? How can we be sure that the abuse you describe actually took place? Emily's eyes filled with tears, but she held her ground. Yes, I've been estranged from them because of the abuse. The scars on my body are proof of what I went through. I have medical records and testimonies from friends who saw the bruises and burns. Tom interjected, Your Honor, we have submitted these records as evidence. Emily's testimony is corroborated by multiple sources. The judge looked at the opposing counsel. Do you have any further questions? The opposing counsel shook her head. No, Your Honor. The judge turned to Emily. Thank you for your testimony, Emily. You may step down. As Emily returned to her seat, I reached out and took her hand, giving it a reassuring squeeze. She looked at me, her eyes reflecting a mixture of relief and anxiety. You did great, Em, I whispered. We're one step closer. The legal battle continued over the next few weeks, with both sides presenting their arguments and evidence. It was an exhausting process, emotionally and mentally draining for both of us. But through it all, Emily's strength and resilience never wavered. She faced each day with a determination that left me in awe. One afternoon, as we sat in Tom's office, he reviewed the latest developments in our case. We're making progress, he said, looking up from his notes. The evidence we've presented is compelling, and the judge seems to be sympathetic to our case. Emily nodded, her face tense with worry. Do you think we'll win, Tom? I believe so, he replied confidently. But we need to stay strong and continue to present our case clearly and honestly. As the final court date approached, my anxiety grew. I knew how much was riding on the outcome of this case, and I wanted more than anything for Emily to find the peace and freedom she deserved. On the day of the final hearing, we arrived at the courthouse early, taking a moment to collect ourselves before entering the courtroom. Emily looked at me, her eyes filled with determination. Whatever happens today, I'm grateful for everything you've done, John, she said softly. I couldn't have faced this without you. We're in this together, Emily, I replied, pulling her into a hug. No matter what happens, we'll face it side by side. The hearing began, and Tom presented our final arguments. The opposing counsel attempted to discredit our evidence, but their efforts seemed increasingly desperate. When the judge finally spoke, the courtroom fell silent. After reviewing all the evidence and testimonies, I find in favor of the plaintiff, the judge said, her voice firm. The restraining order will be granted, and any contact from Emily's parents will result in a fine of $10,000. Emily gasped, tears streaming down her face. I felt a surge of relief and joy, pulling her into a tight embrace. We did it, Emily, I whispered. You're free. As we left the courthouse, the weight of the past began to lift. Emily's journey to healing was far from over, but we had taken a monumental step. Together, we would continue to face whatever challenges lay ahead, armed with the strength of our love and the courage we had found in each other. The days following the court's decision were a mix of relief and reflection. Emily and I were finally free from the immediate threat of her parents, but the road to emotional recovery was just beginning. We decided to focus on creating a space where we could both heal and rebuild our lives together. The weekend after the court ruling, we took a trip to a cozy cabin in the mountains. It was a place we had often dreamed of visiting, a sanctuary away from the hustle and bustle of city life. We hoped the change of scenery would help us both find some peace. As we arrived at the cabin, Emily's eyes lit up with a sense of wonder. "John, this place is beautiful. I can't believe we're finally here." "I'm glad you like it," I said, smiling as I opened the door and let her inside. I thought it would be a nice change of pace for us. We could use some time to ourselves. We spent the first evening settling in, unpacking our things and preparing a simple dinner. As we sat by the fireplace, the crackling flames casting a warm glow, Emily looked more relaxed than she had in weeks. "This place feels like a haven," she said, her voice soft and content. "It's so peaceful." "I'm glad you think so," I replied, pouring us each a glass of wine. "We've both been through a lot lately. It's important that we take this time to focus on ourselves." We spent the evening talking about our hopes and dreams for the future, our conversation meandering from lighthearted topics to deeper reflections on our past experiences. Emily was more open than I had ever seen her, sharing her feelings and fears with a vulnerability that was both heartbreaking and beautiful. "I've always wanted to travel more," Emily said, her eyes shining with excitement. "Maybe we could plan a trip to Europe or Asia someday." "That sounds amazing," I replied. "We could start planning now. It's important to focus on the future and not let the past hold us back." As the days passed, we continued to enjoy our time in the cabin. We went hiking, took long walks in the woods, and spent evenings stargazing from the porch. Each activity seemed to help Emily gradually shed the weight of her past. One evening, as we sat on the porch wrapped in blankets, I noticed Emily gazing at the night sky with a contemplative expression. I reached over and took her hand. "Do you want to talk about anything?" I asked gently. Emily turned to me, her face illuminated by the moonlight. "I've been thinking a lot about what happened. It's still hard to believe that everything is finally over." "It's normal to feel that way," I said. "Healing takes time, but you don't have to go through it alone. I'm here with you every step of the way." She squeezed my hand, her eyes reflecting a mix of gratitude and sadness. "Thank you, John. I don't know what I would have done without you. You've been my rock through all of this. I'm just doing what anyone in my position would do," I replied, leaning in to kiss her forehead. "I love you, Emily. We're in this together." The next morning, Emily and I decided to visit a nearby town for some local sights and a change of pace. As we explored the quaint shops and enjoyed a leisurely lunch at a small cafe, Emily seemed to be rediscovering a sense of joy. "John, look at this," she said, holding up a small handmade bracelet she had found in a local shop. "It's beautiful. I think I'll get it as a memento of our trip." "That's a great idea," I said, smiling as she carefully wrapped the bracelet. "It's important to have these little reminders of happy moments." As the week drew to a close, we returned to our home with a renewed sense of hope and connection. The cabin had provided us with a much-needed respite, and we were ready to face the future with a fresh perspective. One evening, as we sat together on the couch, I reached out and took Emily's hand in mine. "I want you to know that no matter what happens, I'm always here for you. We'll continue to build our lives together and face whatever comes our way." Emily looked at me with a tender smile. "I know, John, and I promise to keep working on healing and growing. Together, we can overcome anything." As we embraced, I felt a profound sense of peace. The journey ahead would undoubtedly have its challenges, but with Emily by my side, I was confident that we could face anything together. Our love had become a source of strength and resilience, and we were ready to embrace the future with hope and determination. The days following our retreat at the cabin were filled with a sense of renewal and optimism. Emily and I had spent the week reconnecting and reflecting, and now it was time to take those renewed feelings and apply them to our daily lives. We had faced the storm together, and now we were ready to build a future on the solid ground we had worked so hard to establish. One crisp Saturday morning, Emily and I decided to take a long walk in a nearby park. The air was fresh, and the colors of autumn were painting the landscape in brilliant hues of orange and red. As we strolled along the winding paths, I could see the weight of the past slowly lifting from Emily's shoulders. "John, I've been thinking," Emily said, her voice contemplative, as she picked up a fallen leaf and examined it, "about everything we've been through and how much it's changed us." "I've been thinking about that too," I replied, glancing at her with a smile. "It's been a challenging journey, but I feel like we've come out stronger on the other side." Emily stopped walking and turned to face me, her eyes earnest. "I want to make a renewed commitment to our relationship. I know we faced a lot of difficulties, but I truly believe that we can build a life together that's full of love and happiness." I reached out and took her hands in mine. "I feel the same way. We've been through so much, and we've supported each other every step of the way. I want us to continue to grow together, to face the future with hope and determination." We walked to a small clearing in the park where a bench overlooked a serene pond. We sat down, and I could see the reflection of our joined hands in the water. Emily looked at me with a gentle smile, her eyes reflecting a deep sense of gratitude and love. "John," she began, her voice trembling slightly, "I want to thank you for everything you've done for me. You've been my rock, my support, and my constant source of strength. I know that I've struggled with my past and my insecurities, but your unwavering love has helped me find my way." I squeezed her hands, my heart swelling with emotion. "Emily, you don't need to thank me. You've shown incredible courage and resilience. You've faced your past with such strength, and I'm proud of the person you've become. I'm grateful to be on this journey with you." We sat in comfortable silence for a moment, savoring the peaceful surroundings and the closeness we shared. Then I took a deep breath and continued. "I want to make a promise to you," I said, my voice steady. "No matter what challenges we face in the future, I will always be here for you. I promise to support you, to love you, and to work together to build the life we've always dreamed of." Emily's eyes filled with tears, and she nodded, her voice barely a whisper. "I promise the same, John. I will always be here for you, and I will work every day to be the partner you deserve. Together, we can face anything." As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the park, I took out a small box from my pocket and opened it to reveal a delicate necklace with a heart-shaped pendant. I had planned to give it to Emily as a symbol of my commitment. "Emily," I said, opening the box and holding out the necklace, "I wanted to give you this as a symbol of my love and commitment. It's a reminder of the promises we've made to each other and the future we're building together." Emily's eyes widened in surprise and delight as she took the necklace from me. "It's beautiful, John." "Thank you." I helped her fasten the necklace around her neck, and she smiled up at me, her eyes shining with happiness. "I'll cherish this forever," she said softly. We stood up and continued our walk, feeling a renewed sense of purpose and connection. The future was still uncertain, but with our love and commitment guiding us, we felt ready to embrace whatever came next. As we returned home, we began to put our plans into action. We started to discuss our goals for the future, from travel plans to personal growth, and we made a pact to support each other's dreams and aspirations. We were determined to create a life filled with joy and fulfillment, one built on the strong foundation of our love and commitment. The journey had been difficult, but it had also brought us closer together. Our renewed commitment to each other was a testament to the strength of our bond and our shared vision for the future. As we faced each new day, we did so with the confidence that, together, we could overcome any obstacle and build a life filled with love, happiness, and hope.